Good afternoon, and thanks for tuning in to Politics and the Pulpit. This is your holy host as we consider the world through the lens of the Word here on your hometown station, KHTS, AM 1220 and 98.1 FM. As usual, we have a great show on tap for you today, and here are some of the things lined up for the show. I want to just go through them very quickly because I don't know if we're going to be able to get through all these things because it's really been a kind of a pretty busy news day, pretty busy news cycle, really the last 3 days. But the first thing I want to kind of talk about is what I've kind of been ranting about the last couple of weeks is what will it mean for churches going forward now that the Disrespect for Marriage Act is passed? Yes, it got passed last week. The second thing I'm going to try to talk about today is discrimination is back, and unless you check certain boxes, you will not be allowed in our restaurant. You say, what's that about? More about that in a minute. And then thirdly, if we're able to get to this, is the Republican Party on a suicide mission to alienate their base as they are on the verge of taking back power in the House? Again, I want to get into all three of those things. I mean, we could talk about literally, we could talk about Elon Musk the whole hour here, but that would be quite literally a waste of my time. We could talk about all the Twitter dumps. We could talk about Biden's fumbles, and we'll talk about that probably slightly here in a little bit. But there's a lot of things that I like to cover today. The first thing I want to just talk about real quickly is if our board man, Matt Frieda, can get on the microphone there. Matt has got a new show here on KHTS each Thursday at 12 o'clock called Out of Bounds. Would you explain that, Matt?
Oh, well, thank you, Pastor Cook.
Yes.
Yes, Out of Bounds. It is a new sports show that we are doing here on KHTS, your hometown station, on Thursdays at noon, and cover all the things on the field and all the topics and big storylines off the field as well. So thank you for that.
You guys, please listen to that coming on tomorrow at 12 o'clock, Out of Bounds, because obviously they're talking about stuff not only on the field but off the field.
Correct.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that very much. Of course, Matt does our board here, and evidently he's told me a couple weeks ago that his time is limited here, so we're thankful for his time. Because he's got bigger things, he's got bigger fish to fry. But anyway, but first, I'd like to deal with a few local things here. For those of you that are listening in Santa Clarita, thank you very much. I want to give a huge congratulations to Jason Gibbs, who was sworn in as Santa Clarita's new mayor yesterday. Jason, of course, won his election a couple of years ago as council and now has been sworn in as Santa Clarita's new mayor. And I would encourage all of you out there to please pray for our new mayor, that he would make the right and righteous decisions for our city going forward. And by the way, if you want to watch yesterday's city council session, you can do so on hometownstation.com via Facebook as well, and you can watch all of the goings-on there at Santa Clarita City Council. Also, for those of you that have not had your head under the pillow, we had a huge Twitter file dump the other day that only substantiated what we all assumed for the last few years. By the way, Matt, would you turn on the air? It's getting hot in here. The first thing that this fifth Twitter dump established for us is, number one, that Twitter, along with other social media sites, were shadow banning conservative tweets and posts without the knowledge of the one tweeting or posting. You can actually find a video online of Jack Dorsey explaining exactly what shadow banning is, and in the very same breath, he says that Twitter's not doing that. And then the second thing we found out through this Twitter file dump from a couple days ago was that Twitter planned to ban President Trump based upon both external governmental pressure, that is the Department of Justice and the FBI and others applying pressure to Twitter, and internal pressure from those within Twitter themselves, the Gen Z employees and those guys that just could not stand anything that came from the Twitter feed of President Trump. So they were experiencing pressure from the government. They were experiencing pressure from their inside. And all I can tell you is this. If you have a social media site that is shadow banning conservative ideas, conservative electioneering talk, conservative ideas without the knowledge of the one tweeting or posting, then can you say two words, election interference? I mean, why not? Isn't it election interference when you're not allowing at least one side to get their stuff across, but you are giving full-bore access to the other side, a.k.a. the left, to get their stuff across? I want you to think about this. The left has been gaslighting. Yes, I know that is a very popular word. In 2022, gaslighting was the most looked up word. But the left has been gaslighting the public about the talk concerning the right causing election interference when the left was doing it all along. That is the titular definition of gaslighting. When you blame somebody else for doing what you are all along doing. And as far as I'm concerned, this is election interference. I don't know if it was enough to sway an election in 2020. I've seen all the polls. Some of you saw the polls too about the whole Hunter Biden laptop thing. Had that information been out there long enough for the public to consume it and to digest all of the particulars of that story, a pretty decent percentage would have voted a completely different way in 2020, and that might have made the difference for Donald Trump. I don't know, but it's something like 47,000 votes in 3 different states that essentially gave Biden the presidency in 2020. I mean, just think about it. It's possible that had that election interference not occurred via the Hunter Biden laptop story, it is very possible we could still be saying President Trump right now instead of the current occupant in the White House. Again, this is the epitome of gaslighting. And here's what I posted on Facebook about the latest revelations from Twitter. I'm just going to read it to you. As of today, December 12th, 2022, Elon Musk has just put out Twitter Files number 5. In this latest Twitter dump, we see how the powers that be decided to once and for all dump Trump from Twitter. Regardless of how you feel about President Trump, what we ought to be far more concerned about is in the precedent this potentially could have set up. If not for Musk at the helm of Twitter, the majority of these, quote, backroom tweets and dirty dealings with the FBI and the Department of Justice would have never seen the light of day. What we as conservatives have suspected for years from Twitter and from other social media companies for that matter, has been vindicated with the release of these Twitter files. Conservative tweets, conservative conversations, and conservative posts were shadow banned without the knowledge of the one posting or the one tweeting. Free speech was being monitored by the elites, and only those posts and only those tweets that furthered the globalist leftist Biden narrative were allowed to trend. I know what you're thinking. This could only happen in a country controlled by a totalitarian and authoritarian regime. After all, if what I just described were happening to leftist Democrats and to former President Obama, the lamestream media would be shouting from the rooftops. Just remember, censorship is a tool of the left. It is useful to them because it helps them to control the narrative and to push their collective agenda. And say what you will, and I know you will, I believe it was providential that Musk took over Twitter. In the liberating words of John's Gospel, chapter 8, verse 32, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. There's no doubt in my mind that a guy like Elon Musk, who I'm sure is not a Bible-believing Christian, but at least is a patriotic individual, loves the country, and wants information to be put out there. I thank God that Musk is in the post that he's in right now, and I'm really looking forward to the next dump about the coronavirus. We're going to have some interesting stuff to talk about next Wednesday, perhaps. I don't know if we're going to do this next Wednesday or not. Maybe it'll be the Wednesday after next. But anyway, we might have my family come in next week. But if that doesn't happen, we're going to be talking about the coronavirus dump and some stuff about the vaccinations that are quite interesting that has just been released on Rumble and a few other platforms that we'll talk about either next week or the following week. Well, if you've been following the show the last couple weeks, I've been talking about the Respect for Marriage Act that potentially would have been passed, but then actually did get passed. I call it the Disrespect for Marriage Act. It was passed last week with 39 House Republicans voting yes. Now, there were 7 defections, or 8 defections, I should say, because if you remember, there were originally 47 House Republicans that voted for this a few months back, but now it's down to 39 House Republicans. But again, enough Republicans had their fingerprints on this to move this bill to Biden's desk. Now, my only hope going forward is that this bill will be challenged in the Supreme Court and will be found unconstitutional. So, Lord willing, some brave attorney general in Texas or Missouri will challenge this bill and send it to the ash heap of history where, frankly, it belongs. Somebody that voted for this bill told me this. He says, even sinners have rights. Now, I get that. We're all sinners, technically. Let's just be honest. The problem is, we don't need to be passing legislation to accommodate their sin. And those who do pass laws that accommodate their sin are complicit in doing so. That word complicit, for those of you that are a Gen Z out there, just means you are kind of responsible for it yourself. Now, the inimitable Ben Shapiro, who I agree with about 85% of the time, tweeted out an interesting observation that somewhat hits the nail on the head concerning the passage of this bill. And this is a hat tip right scoop here for those of you who like to go on that site. It's entitled, Ben Shapiro Explains What Biden and Democrats Are Really Trying to Do with the Respect for Marriage Act. And I'm just going to read his various tweets and specifically center my attention on the one tweet that I feel hits the nail. Quote, when Biden says that the, quote, Respect for Marriage Act is a vital step, he means that this is only the beginning of the slippery slope. In 2006, he said a constitutional amendment to protect traditional marriage was unnecessary. Biden said this in 2006. He said it was unnecessary. Everyone, he said, agreed that marriage was one man and one woman. 12 years later, he says that if you believe that, you're a bigot, a racist, a homophobe, and a transphobe. The agenda is not legal formalization of same-sex monogamous relationships. It is use of government to obliterate traditional values and intermediary societal institutions that embody them. This is why Biden made transing the kids part of his speech today. This was yesterday, of course. It's why he's lumping together interracial marriage and same-sex marriage. The purpose is to delegitimize traditional values and the natural law belief in the superiority of male-females, or sex distinctions generally, in the same way we have properly delegitimized racism. And here's what Shapiro says in conclusion, which I pretty much agree with, but I'm going to just kind of offer a few caveats. Shapiro says the end goal of all this, a national state that stands as the god of a new moral system, and automized individuals without recourse to intermediary institutions of community or civil society. Thus, will a new, better form of community bloom rooted in the cult of expressive individualism. In short, Shapiro says, when people like Biden say they aren't coming after your kids' education, how you raise your kids in your home, your church, or your business, don't believe them. They were lying in 2006, and they're lying now. I think the money shot from Ben Shapiro's flow of tweets here is where he says the end goal is a national state that stands as the god of a new moral system. In other words, the state takes over for morality. The state declares what is moral, what is not moral, or the state just simply says, here is the new morality going forward. Yeah, this was the morality that we had for thousands and thousands of years that have worked and been sufficient for societies in terms of perpetuity, but we as the state, capital S, are now the god of this world, and we are going to just tell you what the new morality is. See, this is the problem with the left, and I know this isn't the problem with all of the left, but I would say about 97 to 98% of the left, is that the majority of the left is godless, and they have absolutely no moral authority, and so therefore they really rely on the state to tell them and us what to do. This is the problem. They don't have a morality that is grounded in a final authority, something that is final. So they're looking to the state, and the shifting ground of the state in order to conclude and then to force the rest of society to follow suit. And if the rest of society does not follow suit, then we just name call you, and then we bastardize you, and then it won't be long before we'll all be pushed into train cars and asked to be taking a shower down the road. So who knows? I'm not suggesting that'll happen, but it's very possible because we're living in a strange new normal right now where a group of people are collectively looking at the state, capital S, not lowercase s, capital S, for all things moral. Whereas just a few years ago, and in fact at the founding of our country, many of our founders looked to the Word of God or to good preachers who preach the Word of God, and that's where they look to. Today, they're looking to the state. I was also pointed to the text of the bill by those who voted for this Respect for Marriage bill to reassure me and others that religious liberties would be ensured and enshrined, and I was sent a text of the bill. I'm going to read the two, it's section 6 from this bill. It's only 2 pages, by the way, and this was something that was brought to my attention by one of the individuals who voted for the Disrespect for Marriage Act. It's section 6, and the title on this section is No Impact on Religious Liberty and Conscience, and I'm going to read exactly what it says. Letter A, in general, nothing in this act or any amendment made by this act shall be construed to diminish or abrogate. Diminish or abrogate means to take away or to make less than, for those of you in Gen Z, a religious liberty or conscience protection otherwise available to an individual or organization under the Constitution of the United States or federal law. Letter B, under no impact on religious liberty and conscience, goods or services. This is about churches and organizations that perform weddings and that of that nature. It says, quote, consistent with the First Amendment to the Constitution, nonprofit religious organizations, including churches, synagogues, temples, non-denominational ministries, interdenominational and ecumenical organizations, missions organizations, faith-based social agencies, religious educational institutions, and nonprofit entities whose principal purpose is the study, practice, or advancement of religion, and any employee of such an organization shall not be required to provide services, accommodations, advantages, facilities, goods, or privileges for the solemnization or celebration of a marriage. Any refusal under this subsection to provide such services, accommodations, advantages, facilities, goods, or privileges shall not create any civil claim or cause of action. Now, some of you might think, well, that sounds pretty good. Sounds good to me too. The only problem is I sure hope it stands. That's my problem. See, we're dealing with fallen people here that put together a bill that is essentially accommodating fallen people to do fallen things. This is why I suggested earlier that we should not be, acquiescing to these folks and creating laws to further their sexual contrivances. But the fact is, my concern is not, again, for a month from now or 2 months from now. My concern is a couple years from now. Who knows what's going to happen with this bill? Many of the folks, the 39 Republicans who voted for this in the House and the 12 in the Senate, really couldn't tell you, frankly, if all of the Section 6, no impact on religious liberty and conscience, part of this bill is going to be enacted and enforced. I hope it will be. I truly do. But I'm not sure. There are 2 Supreme Court hearings happening over the course of the last few days in reference to the cake baker from Colorado and the internet site company lady that refused to do a internet site for a gay wedding. And now both of those have been in litigation for 6 and 8 years, respectively, I believe. It might be the inverse of that. And you got to ask yourself this question: do churches like Freedom's Way Baptist Church or other organizations out there have an endless supply of revenue in order to just constantly go into litigation and pay for lawyers and pay for fees? I don't think so. I don't think so. So again, I do hope that the Section 6 of this particular bill holds. I don't believe it will, but hey, it's okay that I'm wrong. When we come back here on Politics in the Pulpit, let me ask you a question. Is discrimination alive and well in progressive America? Sure is, especially if you're a Bible-believing Christian. More on that when we turn here on Politics in the Pulpit with your holy host, Pastor Jerry Cook, on your hometown station, KHTS 98.1 FM and AM 1220. See you. All right, we're back here on Politics and the Pulpit, live on KHTS FM 98.1 and AM 1220, your hometown station. Before the break, we kind of talked about, is discrimination alive and well today in progressive America? And of course, I put progressive in quotes because obviously that's what the left wants. They want a progress, a moving forward. At least that's how they want to initially define it. But is discrimination alive and well today in progressive America? Well, it sure is if you're a Bible-believing Christian. Yep. I have an article here in my formerly nicotine-stained fingers, hat tip Rush Limbaugh for that wonderful phrase, from the Washington Examiner. And the title of it is called Christian Conservative Group Denied Service at Virginia Restaurant Deemed Unsafe. Not the people, the Christians who came in, but the staff felt like they would be, quote, unsafe if they came in to eat. I'm going to read a little bit from this, and then we're going to hear from our current occupant in the White House gaslighting us and making a fool of himself at the same time. A Christian and conservative nonprofit organization based in Richmond, Virginia, was rejected service at a restaurant based upon its political beliefs. Yes, this is 21st century America, folks. It goes on to say the Family Foundation had scheduled an event at the Metzger Bar and Butchery. Can you imagine a Christian organization at the bar? Anyway, on Wednesday, but had its reservations canceled by the restaurant less than 2 hours before the scheduled time. The organization found out that its religious views would somehow make the staff of the restaurant feel unsafe. Yeah, these are the same people that we expect to storm the beaches of Normandy. Anyway, quote, are they planning to ask all customers what they believe and where they send their donations before allowing people to enter? Now, granted, I know that's logically what we would want to ask. But the reason why this restaurant canceled their event 2 hours before the scheduled event was to take place is because they probably looked online, found out what this family foundation believes, realized that they were Christian-based, and said, can't have you because our staff feels like they would be unsafe having you here. Again, the Family Foundation of Virginia President Victoria Cobb told the Washington Examiner, quote, Americans expect to hold differing views and even champion different causes while still dining at the same establishment. I don't know about you, but I've been having dinner at restaurants for, a lot of years. And I'm sure there's Democrats, and I'm sure there's Republicans, and I'm sure there's even some socialists and commies sitting across the table from me. But, that doesn't matter as long as they're paying, right? But I just can't believe this. This is the country that we live in. But then we have the occupant in the White House saying some strange, dumb, idiotic things about the bill that just got passed with Republican help, of course, the Disrespect for Marriage Act. And here is 2 clips. Matt's going to play them for you here, queued up together, of the current occupant not only gaslighting the public about the stupidity of what this bill would supposedly do or not do, and then at the same time showing how foolish she is. Matt.
When hospitals, libraries, and community centers are threatened and intimidated, because they support LGBTQ children and families, we have to speak out. We must stop the hate and violence, like we just saw in Colorado Springs, where a place of acceptance and celebration was targeted for violence and terror. We need to challenge the hundreds of callous, cynical laws introduced in the states targeting transgender children, terrifying families, and criminalizing doctors who give children the care they need. We have to protect these children so they know they are loved, and we will stand up for them and say they can seek for themselves.
Now listen to the stupidity of the current occupant of the White House. It's amazing when these guys talk about we need to protect the kids. That is code for we need to take the kids. We need to indoctrinate the kids. We need to do something with the kids legislatively where the parents have no say. I mean, what exactly are we keeping the kids from doing? We're keeping them from chopping off their private parts and for sewing up their private parts, and then for being given beta blockers and other kinds of weird fluids to inject into their system to transition them into something that they supposedly naturally are. Well, if they naturally are, then why do they need to transition at all? And these are kids, folks. Kids. This is the same political party that for the last 2 decades are always talking about it's about the kids, it's about the kids, it's about the kids. But in reality, they don't care about the kids. In fact, they would have 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8-year-old kids make decisions about their own sexuality without the parents' knowledge, but yet you got to have somehow parental permission from your parents in order to take an aspirin at school. I mean, there's no common sense here. I mean, the kid can't understand or make a distinction between dolls and reality and talks to imaginary people, but yet that individual has a complete and full mental faculties to be able to make a decision about their sexual nature and what they're going to be looking like 20 years from now? I mean, seriously, it's dumb. And the current occupant in the White House should be ashamed of himself, but he's not, because what he's doing is gaslighting. Here's the second clip. Matt, play it.
Justice Thomas went even further, and he wrote the following quote: "We should reconsider all the court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, Obergefell. That means he thinks we should reconsider whether you got the right to access to contraception. And yes, we should reconsider whether you have the right to marry who you love. And that's not only the challenge ahead. When a person can be married in the morning and thrown out of a restaurant for being gay in the afternoon, this is still wrong."
Sure, it's wrong. I don't know when that's happened or when that has happened. I do know that happened to a Christian group. We just read the story. Isn't it weird how they gaslight like that, talking about how some transgender guy or some gay guy goes in a restaurant, gets married, whatever, and then gets kicked out? No, that hasn't happened. Not that I know of. If you know of something, email the radio station. I don't know if that's happened. But what's funny is that happened specifically to a bunch of Christians in Virginia. That is the epitome of gaslighting, the most searched word in 2022. By the way, do me a favor when you get a chance. Why don't you watch the movie Gaslight? It stars Charles Boyer, the famed French actor, and Ingrid Bergman, the babe from the 1940s. And it was made, sometime in the early to mid-1940s, between 1941 and 1945. It was a great movie, about 2 hours long. The only problem is it was made in a time when there's long, drawn-out shots. So for those of you in Gen Z who can only pay attention for about 2 seconds, you might want to just prepare yourself for this movie. But it is a perfect example of what gaslighting is, set in a movie series. Now, the president just gaslighted. He just gaslighted the whole country, because the only group that I know of that got thrown out of a restaurant recently was a Christian group. By the way, yeah, there was a time in America's history where if you were a colored individual, you couldn't walk into a restaurant, or you had to go in the back door, or you had to eat in the back alley, or whatever the case is. Well, you know what? That's not America anymore. And I'm glad that's not America anymore. That's a part of our history that hopefully we can kind of move past, repent of, and kind of, put under the blood, if you will. I mean, I don't know why we always have to relive it, but that seems to be the desire of the left, is for us to constantly relive some of our past that we would like to forget. Isn't it amazing that those that are always bringing up the past are the ones that are kind of reintroducing some of what we did in the past in the present? That's essentially what happened in Virginia. The president is gaslighting the American public and in the process making a complete fool of himself. Which then leads me to the last topic that I want to deal with today on Politics in the Pulpit, which is this. Is the Republican Party on a one-way collision course with their own constituents? And I say this as a Republican who happens to be a constitutional, let me rephrase that, who happens to be a Christian constitutional conservative, in that order. I want the best for the Republican Party in the House in 2023. I'd like them to do some amazing work. I'd like to see some great bills come out that are healthy and that are good for America. But is the GOP gambling on a bill that could give conservatives a reason to never vote for them again? Hat Tip Town Hall here. This is Matt Vespa who wrote this yesterday. And it's entitled, "The GOP is Gambling on a Bill That Could Give Conservatives a Reason to Never Vote for Them Again." It goes on like this. It says, "Can someone hit the brakes? We're on a runaway train traveling at high speed, approaching a bend, and destined to careen off the tracks unless a brave soul tells the Republican Party to torpedo this heinous immigration deal that's being mulled up on the Hill." And then he went on to say, "I never thought I'd see the day when some Republicans would willingly back a mass amnesty bill and be blind to the fact that the only people who gain to benefit from this push, both in the immediate and long term, are Democrats." In the words of Ellen Ripley, quote, "Nuke the entire site from orbit when it comes to this bill, which we have railed against since the first details were made public." We're talking about millions of people, and it doesn't disincentivize illegal immigration at all. If anything, it resets for another massive amnesty move in a generation or two, so it doesn't secure the border, doesn't take the issue off the table, and is a classic kick-the-can-down-the-road move we often see from elected officials. The only difference is it's the GOP that is going to get screwed. And you say, who are the authors of this bill? Well, it is, quote, Senator Tom Tillis from North Carolina, Republican, a rhino in many estimations, and Kirsten Sinabun from Arizona, who became independent a week ago, last Friday actually. It's Kirsten Sinema, but I call her Sinabun. These are the principal negotiators of this deal. And the far left must be chuckling, Vespa goes on to say, over this because they know the Republican blood sports that could come from this bill. Here's another article by Kurt Schlichter, Colonel Kurt Schlichter from Town Hall. It says, "Republican establishment, ? That is the question of the hour. Very stupid, extremely stupid, transcendentally stupid." And he goes on to say, "We have three big issues right now where the GOP establishment is at a fork in the road. One path ahead is consistent with conservative principles, with the base's inclinations, and with not being brain-dead half-wit. The other path is what the Republican elite will probably do. Issue one is Senator Tom Tillis' inexplicable decision to cavort with the communists to secure amnesty and ensure the resulting chain migration of millions of people who will follow behind the illegal aliens who want to reward for breaking our laws." And it goes on to talk about how lame brain Tillis is. We kind of expect. All right, we're back for our final segment here on Politics and the Pulpit on your hometown station, KHTS, AM 1220 and 98.1 FM. Want to give you a few shameless plugs here as we close out the show today. If you're looking for a Christmas Eve service, December 24th at 6:30 p.m. at Freedom's Way Baptist Church, we will be hosting a Christmas Eve services. It'll be a traditional service, and it'll be a candlelight service. And then for those of you that might be in a church where they canceled Christmas service on Sunday morning, we will be continuing to have ours at 10:30 a.m. And you can actually go on to the KHTS Facebook site. You can actually see the invite there. And that's at 10:30 a.m. There'll be no Sunday school or no evening service that day, just a morning worship service at 10:30 a.m. And then if you're interested in all things Darwin, evolution, and, dinosaurs and things of that nature, We have a creation speaker coming out to our place on January 29th. That's the last Sunday of January of 2023. His name is Russ Miller, and he'll be with us all three services at 9:15, 10:30 a.m., and 5 p.m., and he will be talking about Darwin, dinosaurs, evolution, and what else you might have, and we'll be supporting, obviously, and showing the biblical and scientific evidence for the Genesis account of the Bible. So if those are things that interest you, I'd encourage you to come out to those events. Also, if you're looking for a school for your young kids that will educate and not indoctrinate, I would encourage you to send them over to Lighthouse Christian Academy and talk to Christine Aragon, our school administrator, who will oblige you in the upcoming spring semester for 2023 or the fall semester for 2023. And you can find Lighthouse Christian Academy on Facebook, or you can find us at freedomswaybaptistchurch.com, freedomswaybaptistchurch.com, and look on the bar there and check out Lighthouse Christian Academy. Click the link and find out all that information. While we were at break here, I was just looking at Right Scoop, which again is a great right-wing site, and it says here, read the full mewling, whiny letter Democrats wrote to Facebook begging Trump stay banned. And if any of this Twitter dump stuff on Monday shed light on anything, all it did was basically validate everything conservatives have been saying. And now, all of a sudden, all these interesting letters and things that we haven't really heard about, that haven't made the light of day, are now coming out. And you can go on the Right Scoop and read this letter. It basically begs Meta, a.k.a. Facebook, to keep Trump banned and things of that nature. And also, just to go out on a positive note and to make you feel good, how many of you knew that the Washington Post is actually going to be laying off some of its workers? You say, the Washington Post, isn't that a liberal magazine, a liberal newspaper? It is. It's hat tip, right tip again. Washington Post publisher Fred Ryan and the employees facing layoffs and firings go into it at an ugly way at a company town hall meeting on Tuesday. This was yesterday. And Fred Ryan was the publisher and came in and said, listen, there's going to be major layoffs because they'd lost 500,000 subscribers in the past year. When you lose over 500,000 subscribers, you cannot continue with the same workforce. And there's a video here, a 1.5-minute video of Fred Ryan making this announcement and watching these guys just absolutely go nuts. And what's funny is this is the same liberal publication that's been telling you that the economy's been going well for the last year. And now that same liberal newspaper is facing a bunch of firings. The irony of ironies. Next week will be the week before Christmas, and there is a possibility I might have my family, my wife and kids, come in and talk a little bit about what the cooks do during this time of year. And you might want to tune in and to hear what a pastor's wife has to say about living with a pastor and being married to a pastor. And we might have that next week. I'm not totally certain yet, but we'll see. But we'll have a lot of fun regardless of what happens. I want to thank you for being faithful, tuning in to Politics The Pulpit each Wednesday live here on your hometown station at 2 o'clock every Wednesday. And encourage you to continue to pray for our new mayor here in Santa Clarita. Pray for those in authority. And please lift up our congressman here in the 25th, soon-to-be 27th Congressional District in Santa Clarita. Again, looking forward to seeing you guys next week or hearing you next week, whatever the case might be. And again, thank you again for listening to the Politics in the Pulpit here on your hometown station, 98.1 FM and AM 1220. We'll catch you next week. Take care.